a prediction that in a few years, one of the primary uses for Bitcoin will be foreign remittances. Here's another market where banks are profiting in the most disgusting way possible. Every year, immigrants working in countries other than their own send home more than $550 billion in a market called foreign remittances. They send home back to their families, and the average immigrant supports more than 12 people back home, usually an entire community. Most of that money goes into the hands of women who use that money to invest in sanitation, healthcare, and education in their local communities. And this is the market that organizations like Western Union have decided is a great place to make profit. And they make profit to the tune of $175 billion a year by charging the poorest people on the planet 10% or more to send money home. Shame. It's an absolute shame. And here's the great news. We can fix that with Bitcoin within the next couple of years. We can set up networks that allow immigrants to use Bitcoin, sometimes without even knowing they're using Bitcoin, to convert local currency into Bitcoin, transmit the Bitcoin across borders, and convert it back into a local currency with a total cost less than 1%. That's 1 to 2 orders of magnitude reduction in fees. That's taking $175 billion and giving more than $100 billion back to the people who earned it, who can then spend it in the country they work in, or they can send it home so that their wife can spend it in sanitation, healthcare, and education in the local community. That can change the life of 2 billion people. So remember, remember why we're doing this. This isn't about buying drugs on the Silk Road. This isn't about enabling criminal activity. Because I look around this room and I don't see too many people who are interested in criminal activity. I see people with hope and aspiration, people who are interested in innovation, and people who are interested in bringing fairness back to currency markets. And we have within our power to fundamentally disrupt some of the most entrenched and anti-competitive industries that exist in the world. Banking hasn't seen any competition for the last 50 years, and that's not an accident. People don't start banks out of their garage and then take them mainstream and fight the main banks. Other than PayPal, nobody else has been able to do it. And PayPal very, very quickly got turned into a traditional bank, so they wouldn't disrupt too much. Well, something interesting just happened. Satoshi Nakamoto invented a method where we can apply innovation to financial services without asking for anyone's permission. Innovation without permission is the power that fuels the internet. It is the mechanism by which a kid in their garage can invent the next big app and take it global without asking anybody's permission. And we've done this again and again on the internet. In fact, a lot of us, especially people who are involved with libertarian ideals or are constantly fighting for freedom and things like that, often feel dejected and despairing and disappointed and disillusioned. After all, the internet is really one giant surveillance machine and it's been captured by the man. And yet there are moments of optimism in that, and one of the greatest moments of optimism for me is that right in the middle of a completely captured, corporatized Apple, iTunes / Google / NSA internet, it gave birth to Bitcoin, a black swan of innovation that no one expected, and that will completely blow away several incumbent institutions and organizations, and there's absolutely nothing they can do to stop it, because the power is in your hands. So when you despair, remember that the internet is still able to deliver massive surprise in the form of things like Bitcoin, and who knows what the next one will be, but I know that I'll be able to buy it for Bitcoin. And one of the most amazing things that's happening now is that Bitcoin has become the de facto currency of the internet. You see, one of the things about the internet that was always difficult since the very beginning was that while you could deliver incredible innovation, and while you could transport content and ideas and services across borders, when it came time to getting paid for that, things would slow down and everything became difficult. So I can be a brilliant entrepreneur in Bangalore, India, and I can invent the latest thing, and if I want to sell it, I have to get in bed with Visa or PayPal, and they're going to take away at least 3% of my money, and then they might freeze my account, and I'm only going to be able to sell it in 19 select countries around the world, and while my content can reach everywhere, the payments can't come back. Well, guess what? Now they can. Money on the internet is an incredibly potent combination. By turning money into a content type, we've made money instantaneously global, instantaneously secure, and now we're going to use that to fuel the internet all over again. We now have, with this new technology, the ability to fuel mesh networks, to fuel infrastructure development, to fuel content creators who can now use micropayments to get paid for the content that they create. We can fuel new applications. We can fuel the entrepreneurs of the future who can now do global IPOs, who can now source funds and loans on the internet directly from other people anywhere in the world using Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't something that just emerged from the internet. Bitcoin is going to turn around and now fuel the internet all over again. I often get asked, which country is going to adopt Bitcoin first? And I find that an amusing question because it makes certain assumptions about borders and sovereignty and nation states, which is so 18th century. The most populous place on the earth is not China. The largest economy in the world is not the United States. The most populous place on the earth is the internet, and the largest economy in the world is the internet, and the internet now has a currency. Thank you. All right. When will Bitcoin reach 10,000? What is this symbol here? Is that the S word? My prediction for Bitcoin is that when Bitcoin achieves mainstream status, the value of Bitcoin will be exactly 1 Bitcoin, or 100 million Satoshis. The simple truth is that asking that question assumes that the vast majority of the economy that we care about is outside of Bitcoin. And I think the success for Bitcoin means that that is no longer the case. To ask the question, how much value in US dollars does Bitcoin have, assumes that the frame of reference is the US dollar, assumes that we want to convert US dollars to Bitcoin, assumes that we care about the economic activity that happens in that economy. That is the same as asking in 1994, how many fax machines will the internet replace? How many long-distance phone calls will it replace? What is the value of the internet if it dominates the long-distance phone call market? And that question makes no fucking sense. But that is exactly the question people were asking in the mid-90s, because to them, that was the paradigm, that was the context. Communications meant that. And to create a new communications medium meant simply replacing the old medium with the new medium, like for like, in a one-to-one translation. You must realize that what we're doing here is not creating a better Visa system so we can go shopping and expend fewer calories when we swipe our cards. That is not the point. And Bitcoin will not be the replacement of e-commerce transactions on Amazon.com with the same e-commerce transactions on Amazon.com in order to buy more plastic Chinese junk. That's not the point here. Bitcoin is not about shopping in the first world. It's about everything else everywhere else. Bitcoin succeeds when a farmer in Kenya can raise money and buy a loan, get a loan to buy seeds from 10,000 lenders all around the world that he has never met through a peer-to-peer lending system. That value was never in dollars. That value didn't exist until Bitcoin comes along and makes it possible for this thing to happen. Bitcoin is all about the things that are not possible with today's money. And that is an enormous economy, far bigger than the existing global economy, because the existing global economy leaves 5 to 6 billion people out of the picture. And so if you imagine Bitcoin as bringing a global transnational currency that is available to all of the people who are today underbanked and unbanked, and people tell me that's a crazy idea because it's never going to happen, because we don't have the infrastructure, because it will take an enormous investment in infrastructure to happen. We know that's not true, because we've already seen this happen with cell phones. Sub-Saharan Africa never got landlines. They just skipped that entire level of technology in a system called leapfrogging, and they jumped directly to cell phones. There are places on the Amazon River where the nearest bank branch is 100 miles downstream by canoe. Those people are not going to get banking because JP Morgan Chase opens a branch. Ever. But guess what? There's a cell phone tower in that village. And that village has a little solar panel, and that solar panel has a Nokia 1000 text messaging phone connected to it, because it's worth having that, and because it's easier to deploy cell phone tower infrastructure everywhere. And now, that Nokia 1000 is a banking terminal, and a Bloomberg terminal, and a Western Union terminal, and a loan origination terminal, and an IPO terminal, and a stock market, and a currency exchange, and a commodity market. And you can do all of those things over text messaging with Bitcoin. So I don't think it's insane to think that when people have this enormous need, if we provide the technology at a level of technology that can be adopted around the world, that this is going to happen. And I would urge you to look at where it has happened before. In Kenya in 2001, they introduced a system that allowed people to transmit cell phone minutes to each other. That system is called M-Pesa. And that system within a year or so became a currency, an informal currency that people started trading in lieu of money because they didn't have any other form of money. They could afford to buy a cell phone, they could afford to buy a plan with minutes because they needed that to communicate with the rest of the world, because that meant economic opportunity for them. So they invested in those things. And then you can imagine this environment where one day someone goes to a shop and says, well, I need some eggs to feed the kids, but I don't have any money. Can I give you 3 cell phone minutes for some eggs? And the shop owner says, sure, whatever, I can always use some more cell phone minutes. And they give some eggs, and a currency is born, just like that. Well, fast forward 12 years later, M-Pesa represents 40%, 40% of the GDP of Kenya. And that's not GDP that existed before and got converted into M-Pesa. This is brand new economic activity that didn't exist before. They did it. We can do this again with Bitcoin, and we can do it globally. So I don't think it's crazy to think about an economy that is built around Bitcoin that is far bigger than the traditional economy, because we can do this on the internet and with text messaging phones now.
Not a platform. So library is actually an open standard that anyone can use. And one of the great things about it is that it's not something that we entirely control.
Excellent. Well, thanks for clarifying that, Jeremy. And last time we were on the show, we mentioned we were talking about library, and since then, full disclosure, Fifth Quill Studios, which is owned by Randy and myself, will be working with the library to provide video content for the company and product. We'll be happy to share these videos with you as they're published. We are not advising you to buy or sell library credits. Of course, we're not advising you to buy or sell anything on this show. That's the nature of Neocash Radio. We do not speculate, and we do not talk about that hype and stuff.
We encourage you to do your own independent research and check things out, and definitely look into security as well as investment, and all those things you want to look into yourself and make your own informed decisions about. And we're just helping to get information to you that might not be finding its way to you by traditional media channels.
And by the way, if you're not holding the private keys, you probably don't own the coin. So keep that in mind. Starting out, big news, of course, is Donald Trump, president-elect.
Holy crap.
Shocked the world. Now, if you've listened to Neocash Radio, we have been talking about how Hillary is the heir apparent. I mean, that's been the thing. And if you watch any sort of media out there, that's what you're being told, fed.
Well, 80% on the markets, though, too. I mean, there are people who they had their money in this saying that it was Hillary.
Right.
It wasn't just
right
it wasn't
up
just
until,
the Viva.
Yeah, right up until the day of the election. Then it swapped. Then it was 79% Donald Trump.
Trump was actually down to 12% in the markets at one point. He went down as the day went on, and then around I want to say 6 p.m. it just shot up for 3 or 4 hours straight.
Wow.
Well, news outlets across the web are asking how, why, as if we've stepped into some alternate reality. Perhaps most poignant are the headlines, "How did everyone get it so wrong?" In this case, courtesy of Politico. This is important to note as many media outlets were directed by or working with the Democratic National Committee. Thanks to WikiLeaks, we know about this stuff. In effect, these so-called news sources were actively trying to manipulate the public discourse and even assert fact where there was only fiction. Politico has another incredulous headline, quote, "How could the polling be so wrong?" unquote. The article tries to make sense of the disparity between the polls and election results. In some cases, polls that showed Trump winning were discarded for polls that fit a more preferable political narrative. WikiLeaks has shown more clearly than ever that the U.S. news media is corrupted and more of a cog in the political machine than a government watchdog. Just as the division and anger over the campaign has eroded the idea of America's united, the revelations that media outlets colluded with Clinton erodes the value and trust that Americans place in news sources. Let me be the first to declare that the mainstream media died with the Clinton dynasty. Good night, sweet prince.
Nice.
Now on to markets. Because, there's also news in markets. They've...
Well, and, I actually saw today on Twitter... well, besides the fact that it looks as though Hillary Clinton won the popular vote while Trump got the electoral vote, which is a repeat of, the 2000 election, how could the polling be so wrong? I guess something came out that showed how a $30 card could hack any one of these voting machines that are being used. Edward Snowden was tweeting about it today. So that's one way that polling could be so wrong.
Let's also remember, so wrong 3%. We're talking about they were wrong by 3%. Now they could just be wrong.
Sure. Definitely. Markets responded to election news last night and with shock as the first movers were futures markets, with the Dow Jones 30 futures dropping more than 880 points in the first 4 hours as the world realized Trump was going to win. This all happening around the 8 to 10 Eastern Standard Time period. And the dollar dropped in value, gold jumped up, the euro saw a boost, all of this happening in the same time as the market panicked. The same futures rallied 1,000 points as of Wednesday afternoon. The S&P 500 futures as well as the NASDAQ futures saw similar movements. U.S. stock markets recovered and are up, but the same can't be said of markets like the Nikkei 225. The Mexican peso has lost against the dollar, likely based on Trump's anti-immigration rhetoric during the campaign. Trump has also not been shy about calling North American free trade deal a disaster that he wants to end, and he's threatened a 35% tariff on goods imported from Mexico, which is huge, which pretty much shuts Mexico out of the United States market.
Yeah, there was some quotes of his I was reading today, and he was kind of called out on that, and he said, hey, that's not going to happen, but it's a threat, and he's a negotiator. He starts high, and that way, if you call out something ridiculous like a 35% tariff, when they quote talk you down to 10%, then you look like a nice guy.
Right.
So who knows? But he seems like a big negotiator.
Well, U.S. Treasuries are in the midst of a sell-off, with the 30-year U.S. yield, which we reported earlier, rising from 2.53% to over 2.8%. The 10-year bond went from 1.72% to 2%, the highest rate it's been since January, which is important to note because there are certain interest rates that are generated from these interest rates here. So I mean, shock the world. Donald Trump is president. Clinton gave her resignation speech earlier today. I was at a diner enjoying some breakfast while I watched this happen, and it's the markets are definitely sort of in this uncertain place. I think they've obviously recovered, but here's the thing with Donald. He's not a known quantity like Clinton is. Like Clinton, you can pretty much expect it's Obama 2.0, bigger, blacker, badder, darker. I don't know, whatever. Just more of that, whatever Obama was. And who knows what Trump's going to do? To be honest with you, he put out this PDF.
Yeah. This is it's definitely another example of Trump shooting past what he wants, because there's a bunch of stuff in here there's no way is going to happen. But he reaffirmed a lot of the stuff. He wants to be out of NAFTA. He had one of the new. I don't know how new this is, but he affirmed that China was a currency manipulator and wants to continue to go after China for manipulating their currency. So definitely some new foreign policy.
Well, we'll definitely talk about China later in the episode, but let's talk about more of Clinton, Randy.
Well, if you've been paying attention to the news recently, WikiLeaks has been releasing more and more damning emails from Hillary Clinton and her campaign manager, or I suppose former campaign manager, John Podesta. Out of tens of thousands of emails, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange points to one in particular as, quote, the most significant email in the whole collection, which shows Hillary Clinton acknowledging that the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia are directly clandestinely funding ISIS or ISIL. Quote from Hillary Rodham Clinton, "We need to use our diplomatic and more traditional intelligence assets to bring pressure on the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistic support to ISIL and other radical Sunni groups in the region." So the reason this is important is because the U.S. government has denied any claims that the actual governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia were funding the Islamic State, instead kind of passing it off as, as Julian Assange put it, as some rogue princes using their cut of the oil money to do whatever they like, although the government disapproves. So not only is this showing that these governments are funding these organizations, they're also funding the Clinton Foundation. So according to the Clinton Foundation, the Saudi Arabian government has donated between $10 and $25 million since the foundation was set up in 1997. So they don't list exact amounts either. They just have these really broad categories that they list on their webpage. And they also claim that no donations came from Saudi Arabia while Clinton worked as the Secretary of State. However, the government of Qatar did donate $1 million to the foundation in celebration, supposedly, of Bill Clinton's 65th birthday in 2011, which is while Hillary was in office. And the foundation actually failed to report that to the State Department. And now when Clinton came into office, she agreed to allow the State Department to review, quote, new or significant increased support from foreign governments when she took that office in 2009. A recent Reuters investigation found that at least 8 other countries besides Qatar, which including Algeria and the UK, gave new or increased funding to the Clinton Foundation during Hillary's tenure without the State Department being informed.
Wow. Well, it's no surprise. This is more of the same from Hillary Clinton. It's just lies or outright corruption, deceit. It's so...
The rules aren't for the ruling class.
Refreshing in a way to not have her be the president-elect. Okay? Whatever you say about Donald Trump, this trove of emails proves is that Hillary is definitely the more evil of the two. If you're going to pick lesser of two evils... Well, geez, I don't even want to say it.
Only time will tell. She's already done plenty of evil, and now this is what happens when you have a centralized system where you have a ruler.
Yes.
They tell us we're free, but we're stuck in this system where one of these clowns became the ruler, and their word is going to be treated, as something sacred.
Well, how about a system where
for the next 4 years
there is no illusion of freedom? We're talking about the Great Fall of China. We've been reporting on the fall in value of Chinese stock markets and yuan since the beginning of the year. Recently, the ruler of China, Xi Jinping, has been consolidating power and ensuring his continued control of the Communist Party of China. In fact, the party has given him the title of core leader, solidifying his authority. Xi has been shoring up support by replacing existing ministers with party members who are more loyal to his rule. Hong Kong has been a casualty of this power grab. 2 recently elected pro-independence activists included a defiant anti-China statement during their oath of office for the Hong Kong legislature. China has blocked the activists from taking their seats in Hong Kong, causing an uproar and kicking off a series of pro-democracy protests.
So there's people coming in that are going to be trying to keep Hong Kong or make Hong Kong sovereign as it was supposed to be, according to when they were released from Great British rule back, 97?
Yes, thanks to some treaties. Yes, and in fact, these 2 pro-independence activists, they can get their seats back. But what they have to do is they have to then, and it's similar to their oath, they have to make this declaration that the pro-independence movement is not for them, it's bad, and they choose the pro-China, stance. So they have to make this declaration.
Right. And
you can have your seat.
Yeah.
Just bow.
And that's where they come up with some subtle way of doing it, but signaling that they don't actually agree, and then that becomes
that's basically what happened with the oath,
right? So that's what happens a lot of times when these kinds of things happen, is that the one group demands it, and then the other group comes up with a way of kneeling but keeping their middle finger up at the same time to send that signal to the people who
kiss the rings.
Well, and in fact, one of the oath takers in this sense, all this person did is say the word China in a different way, which is slang and sort of
China.
it's sort of like a slang against Chinese people, and that's all it really was a different inflection, I guess, on a word. Yeah. Well, the recent U.S. presidential election was heavily censored in China, with state-run TV stations directed to focus on U.S. political scandals instead.
No shortage of those.
Well, yes. The Chinese yuan couldn't be shielded by a firewall, and the U.S. dollar exchange rate has fallen to new lows. Factor in rapid deterioration of China's foreign reserves down to $3.12 trillion, and add a dash of housing bubble ready to burst, and the future looks dire. Capital controls are nothing new to China, and the latest news is that regulations surrounding insurance have tightened, preventing Chinese from buying some foreign insurance products, which has become a stealth loophole to move capital out of mainland China. Hong Kong has seen a surge in insurance sales as a result. President-elect Trump has not been kind to China on the campaign trail, vowing to impose a 45% tariff on Chinese products to protect the U.S. dollar, which, as we talked about with Mexico, would pretty much cut them out of the market.
It's going to be a huge
ridiculous
tariff. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
It's a winning tariff.
I do the best tariffs.
And then everyone has a job now? Is that what happens? Is that the promise? What happens then?
I don't know if he's thought it through.
Yeah,
I think it just sounded good when he roll. Let me just spitball this for a while, and he just stuck with it. So to protect the U.S. dollar, Asian markets like those worldwide are in an uncertain position given the erratic behavior of Trump. Stock markets initially responded accordingly in the U.S., Japan, Australia, China, and Hong Kong by losing between 2 and 5% of their value. And in many cases, those are still the case in Asian markets. So in a nutshell, China is a tyrannical ruler tightening his grip on a weak economy with a failing currency and a housing bubble ready to pop. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Well, I think Trump honestly thinks, and who knows, maybe he can, but he thinks he can renegotiate a lot of these trade deals and go out and get a better deal for America. If there's something that Trump thinks he can do, he can out negotiate anyone. This is what he thinks at a minimum. And so he's like, I'm going to go and do a better job. I'm going to get a better deal.
Well, and that's backed up in some of these articles that some of these ministers are saying to the effect that he's going to just tear up the deal that's in place. Like they're afraid he's just going to be like, no, I'm just going to pull out.
Yeah, I think he'll certainly threaten it. He's like, he'll bluster at a minimum.
Yeah. Oh no, he'll bluster. He's really good at that.
Yeah.
He's got the best bluster.
And I have no idea. I mean, I think certainly, obviously, free flow of capital is a good thing. But then you get into it and you look at some of these trade deals, and it's like, well, wait, but what's actually in here? Is it actually a free trade deal? And so, I don't know about some of these ones.
Well, Randy, what's going on with BTCC? Wow, there's too many E's.
Well, BTCC is the oldest Bitcoin exchange that's still running. It's out of China and it's moving into the U.S. market, and it now offers a U.S. dollar to Bitcoin exchange. It's a new platform. They're going to have spot and margin trading. The exchange has advanced trading options like market, limit, stop, and one cancels the other orders. They also have 25 times margin trading. So if someone who's interested in margin trading, you can put up 4% of what you're looking to invest and borrow the rest from other traders. All but 16 countries and 3 U.S. states will have access to the Bitcoin exchange. Get this, though. Sign up requires a photo of a passport, a selfie with your passport, and a third form of identification.
This is the first time I've ever seen a selfie listed as a ID requirement, like know your customer law requirement.
Yeah, I don't think they're the only one to do that. I think some of the other services require you to share a passport.
I don't get into the other exchanges and whatnot. But,
So,
like the selfie with the
selfie
passport?
of you holding your passport.
So at
Really?
at a minimum, and I don't think, I actually think that to get to the highest level on several of the services. Poloniex, I know for sure I had to do it as part of with library for them to approve us. And that's everyone who reaches the level 3 level on Poloniex. So you don't have to do it; just create accounts. They make it pretty easy to get started. But if you want to reach a certain limit, they want you know. They're trying to be careful. Like these laws exist.
Yeah.
So you gotta follow them, just like you gotta follow a lot of the other ones.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't seen that before either. So
It's just funny. I mean, selfie. I think selfies are ridiculous, but this is a useful selfie.
It's crazy, and it's crazy that that's the standard for ID. Like that's the best we can do is we're gonna have a document that we then photograph ourselves. Like we can just have such better systems to manage identification.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen it's either Visa or MasterCard or someone's trying to roll out some kind of like selfie authorization for purchases as well. I don't remember who it was, but I remember seeing some headline about that not too long ago.
Yeah, because I want MasterCard to be in charge of my identity.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that.
Oh yeah, they haven't ever been hacked before.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no. Never mind. Bitmain announces a new massive data center in Xinjiang. I think that's how you pronounce it. Xinjiang. Bitmain is known for the Ant miner, a cutting-edge Bitcoin ASIC miner, and the Ant Pool, one of the top Bitcoin mining pools. They are expanding their mining operations to include a massive new data center. The first phase of the project will cost 5 billion Chinese yuan, or roughly $800 million, which that number is dropping rapidly. The space is a 39,000 square meter space, which is roughly about 420,000 square feet.
Wow.
And is offering hosting to about 3,600 racks, and it will be using roughly 135 megawatts of power for these ASICs. Besides the ASICs, Bitmain has helped design dust prevention systems and cooling systems for the new location. Bitmain's co-CEO, Jiwan Wu, has made it clear that he supports on-chain scaling through bigger blocks, so it is doubtful that the miners will signal support for SegWit, which personally I'm fine with.
Well, and interestingly enough, I'd seen a list of some of the most powerful data centers, and this one's rumored to be the 3rd largest in the world. And even that like massive NSA building, I think they call it Honeybee, the one that's in Utah, right by Overstock.com's headquarters. I think that's like number 8 on the list, and this will be number 3. So that's going to be all dedicated to Bitcoin in China, which is pretty crazy. Did you see anywhere if it was China, solar or any
it's
wind
in the
power?
China Mobile. There's a China Mobile Park. So there's China. It's in one of the more autonomous regions, and the electricity is subsidized, of course. But it's part of the China Mobile, their cell phone, state-run cell phone thing. So, we're talking about China again, Randy.
There's a lot of China stuff this week. And this one's a peculiar story, and it relies on quite a bit of rumors and speculation, which I normally wouldn't bring up, but it's become a popular topic of discussion, and there's like weird aspects to it, so I didn't want to skip it. But a recent Zero Hedge article, which I tend to take with a grain of salt anyway, but they usually link to stuff, and if they don't, that's when I really start to question. And here was a case where they reported that Chinese regulators were allegedly studying ways to limit Bitcoin transactions that take funds out of the country. So similar to what you were talking about with the insurance policies being bought outside in Hong Kong, sort of as a hedge against more yuan depreciation.
So they were studying the impossible.
Right. Well, if they're mandating that these things if